Nice to finally meet you. You know, we've been emailing back and forth, and I appreciate.
Did you come from Alaska?
Yeah, well, I was in the Yukon, which is, you know,
Yes.
next to Alaska, North Canada.
Okay.
I went up there with my lead actor and my cameraman. We did it's the first feature film that I've done. It's kind of a comedy about a guy who goes north and in the 70s he becomes a firefighter and has many misadventures. And
you do everything. You do tragedy, you do comedy. It's
yeah, no.
amazing.
Well, most of the film I've done the last 11 years have been about fresh water. You know,
Okay.
cleaning lakes and rivers in
Yes.
Japan and talking to the local people about the importance of water. But I've been doing film for about 40 years, but on and off, just as a tool, you know, nothing special. But this Yukon one was costly and time-consuming, and it's not finished yet. But we were lucky because I was saying to Jan, we had very good weather. It had been raining
Yes,
for
yes,
3 months. And
Yes, it's September.
yeah. So
It's
we.
winter.
Yeah, it's near, and usually September in the Yukon is heavy rain. But this time they had the rain in July and early August, and then stopped the day we arrived. And it's been beautiful weather, because we were camping the whole time we're filming, you know, to save money. We didn't use hotels at all, so really hectic schedule.
So,
And,
where are you going to show the film?
well, I hope to have it finished by end of November, which means, you know, edited and music added, and hopefully for sale, you know, before Christmas on Amazon.com and in China and India. And China, India, Germany, and North America are my 4 interested markets.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
So it will go directly on DVD?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how much money it's going to make. If I make my money back, I'll be happy. Yeah. But as you know, I have this NGO business that basically been informing people about fresh water for the last 11 years, since 2000. But since the earthquake last year, we turned our attention to the debris, because it seemed like nobody was interested in that, you know, at all in Japan. The people don't even know about it, you know.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. Yeah, it was not very public, but there were a few key research groups. They in fact they have huge debris problem on Ryukyu Islands and also on Japan seaside.
Oh yeah.
So this debris coming from Korea, China.
Right. You mean normal garbage?
All kind of garbage.
Yeah,
yes,
that's right.
yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes, yes.
lighters and plastic.
Fujieda-san, he collects cigarette lighters.
Oh yeah.
And he knows these stamps,
Where they come from?
where it's manufactured,
Yeah.
and he publishes papers.
Oh, right.
We saw him last week, yes. This
Right.
week.
Last.
Last
That's
week.
right, yeah.
Last
It's
week.
Monday.
Yeah, Gene, you know Gene.
Yes.
They're a big organization in Japan. They also do a great job of cleaning up the beaches and things. Our group is about 20 people, and 4 are translators, and the rest have various positions and, you know, responsibilities. What I did in beginning of the year, this year, was to go up to Soma, which is near a town near Fukushima, and the Soma that has lasted for 1,000 years is gone, completely gone. Minami Soma, all 350 towns along the ocean are gone forever. You know, they totally. If you went there today, you would see nothing. They even have, the only thing was left was the cement foundations, and they've cleaned all that up. So you would see almost nothing there. They've left a few houses as monuments. You know.
Is it still closed, the area?
Oh yeah. The problem was that the fishermen put themselves in danger, because behind the fishermen are small hills, and in front of them is the ocean. So the tsunami has nowhere to go but into the hills, and anything between them and the ocean is crushed. And the reason that the fishermen stayed near the ocean is because if a tsunami comes, they race to their boats, and they try and they run into the tsunami. They take the boats right into the tsunami. So for example, Soma had 120 ships, fishing ships, and 20 were lost and 100 survived. So
It's a good ratio.
yeah, so 100 survived, but when the fishermen came back, all their loved ones and their homes and everything was dead and crushed and gone. So it's kind of a bitter victory, you might say, you know. Yeah, yeah. So anyways, we've been conducting this research about what went out there. We have people now in Alaska and California, Oregon, and Hawaii, interested in connecting with us, but nobody in Canada. It's quite terrible. I wrote to the mayors of Vancouver and Victoria, and they never replied. The mayor of Vancouver replied. He said, "Well, I'd like you to stop in next year."
In fact, British Columbia was one of most affected
Yeah.
area by tsunami.
Sure.
So there are many people in British Columbia.
Yeah. Well, I've tried to get a hold of few and government people, and either they've replied and said not interested, or even the beach cleaning people organization. They sent me an email yesterday. They didn't want to meet me, but they said for me to contact different government organizations. So they have given me something else, but their answers are very unusual.
Same in America. It's very frustrating the way how federal government, federal
Right.
agencies, how they keep it low. And,
Oh yeah.
but now, when 1 year and a half later, after tsunami, it is not clear how right the government or how wrong the government, because the amount that West Coast received so far is clearly less than we feared, but still we know there is a lot of water.
Yeah.
So
I'll ask you some questions regarding
yes,
that.
please. What do you want?
Sure. I've got some here for you. Regarding what you just said as number one, what do you expect to see this fall or winter in the way of debris? What is your guesstimate?
Okay.
I mean, in the Hawaiian area.
Let me say a little bit more generally.
Yeah. In the way of debris.
Right. So first, let me explain what is the basis for our notions.
Sure.
About we are running models, kind of empirical models, based on previous experience from measuring current meters and trajectories of drifting buoys, and models they reflect previous knowledge. So they need to be verified and improved and tuned all the time. Unfortunately, observations of tsunami debris and marine debris in general, they remain very fragmentary, and it's difficult to use them in quantitative way. We have dozens of reports, but most of those reports, in the best case, they just tell us what is in water. Model operates with such variables as density of debris, and no observation can measure density of debris at present.
Right.
So we are using our models in a kind of intuitive way, partly intuitive way, trying to add some factors, hopefully to be able to address dynamics of some particular objects. So what we learned from our models is that different kind of debris, it actually takes different pathways.
Oh yeah.
So there are two main forces acting on any floating object. One comes from ocean, and it includes currents, and not just currents, not just surface currents, but subsurface currents as well. There is vertical shear, vertical structure of currents below the surface. So depending on how deep, what is the vertical extent of the object in water, different parts of ocean subsurface current will affect. Also, waves.
Right.
They push objects down, generally down the wind. Then another force comes from atmosphere, wind, direct force applied to the wind, but also wind pushes ocean, and ocean pushes the object. So it's all interconnected. For like two opposite ends in this spectrum of floating objects, we can say, okay, like balloons or styrofoam, which is highly floatable. We call it high windage. So it sits on ocean surface, but it's mainly pushed by wind. As a rule, it moves very fast. And other kind of objects, for example, derelict fishing gear, they sit deep in water with they are barely seen at the surface, or also microplastic. Microplastic is mixed in the upper tens of meters, and it moves with water. So what we see in our model is light objects such as styrofoam, high windage objects. They were moving from Japan towards west coast pretty fast, and first objects reached west coast probably around November, which is consistent with reports from Washington State and British Columbia. And then this light kind of debris, they were coming on all the stretch of the west coast from Oregon to Alaska. Alaska commonly suffers most of styrofoam, because styrofoam is used by fisheries in large amounts, and fisheries are most active in high latitudes.
Right, yeah.
But this year, people in Alaska, observers on Alaska, they reported enormous amount of styrofoam, and styrofoam is very difficult to remove from the environment. And actually, wind blows it not just on the beach, but for hundreds of yards offshore. So it's pretty large area and hard to reach area, and area that is not populated.
Right, yeah.
By
Going to be there
residents.
a long time.
Yes, yes. So for now, even to assess the extent of pollution in Alaska, it may take pretty big money.
Right.
And a long time.
I hear Alaska government has earmarked, I don't know, 20 million or so.
I would not be surprised.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised.
People are asking for the funds. I have two fellows up there, David Baxter, who found the balls that were returned. He sends me reports, and another fellow named Mike who flies and lands on the beach. And this is, they're saying exactly what you say, that high windage stuff like balls, styrofoam. One fishing village, Minamisoma, they lost 10,000 containers. They're all foam. So there's somewhere out there blowing in the wind. Is from one town alone is 10,000 of those containers like this for carrying fish, you know. And they're all about this deep, about this big, you know, with a flap, the lids go off, you know. So there could be 100,000 of them floating around, some blowing around.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So first point, I guess, is how the high windage stuff is the most visible.
Right. It's most visible, and it's moving faster.
Right.
So partly good news may be that in our models suggest that maybe most of high windage debris is already on the west coast.
Oh.
So for many areas on the west coast, story may be nearly over.
Oh, I see.
But we need to be cautious, because in fact alternative opinion is that what we observe is during this summer there was a smaller number of reports from west coast than during winter. So it may be that our model right, and then already amount is going down, kind of source is exhausted, or there is alternative opinion that winter winds they are more in favor for onshore movement of floating objects than summer winds. So there may be some seasonality. In order to obtain a reliable answer, we would need to explore the area, the offshore area,
Right.
Maybe 1,000 miles west from west coast. But it's difficult to do.
Yeah.
It's difficult to do.
And expensive.
So most likely we will be just sitting and waiting,
Right. Yeah.
as we did before. Good news for west coast is that low windage debris that may remain in water for long time, most of it is not going on west coast. Most of it is now recirculating. It's either moving, lagging behind and is still located north of Hawaii, drifting eastward, or already recirculating southward towards convergent zone, so-called garbage patch.
Oh yeah.
And
so some of it has already gone around and could be that far.
yes.
Oh, I see.
And if we roughly separate on three groups, like high windage, medium windage, and low windage is now north of Hawaii and moving east.
Right.
High windage is mostly on west coast already, and medium windage, it's now recirculating. It's located between California and Hawaii, and it is not going on California. It is now going towards Hawaii.
Oh.
And typical examples for such debris would be half-sunken boats, fishing buoys, oyster buoys,
Oh yeah. Lots of them.
except with the exception of ships and boats registered to tsunami devastated area, it is really hard to prove the origin of such objects as buoys. But in recent 2.5 months, we received 6 reports of oyster buoys. These kind of buoys are used only in the eastern Japan,
Right.
and previously there were only a few occasions when they were seen in Hawaii. They are very rare in Hawaii. Actually, they were seen not on main Hawaiian Islands, but on Midway.
Oh, okay.
But now we have 4 reports of such oyster buoys. They are black, these big buoys.
Right.
From main Hawaiian Islands, and one more from water north of Oahu, and one more from Kurea atoll, which is next to Midway.
The fishing boats are finding them?
People on shore.
On the beach,
People on the beach.
Right.
And yeah.
I see. Okay. Yeah, because I talked to, well, not talked, I emailed to Kaori, what's her name? Kaori? Kore? NOAA in Midway. Some of the people there.
Kurea, yes.
Kore?
Kure, Kure.
Yeah. And they said they hadn't seen anything there. And they said, I thought it was be going south of Midway to the beaches, but it's gone north, they said. Right.
They found, I think it was in December, they found one big orange buoy, but later the owner was identified on Big Island.
Oh, okay. All right.
But recently they found a big oyster buoy. Each of such buoys are hard to trace back to the area of tsunami.
You have to prove it.
Its amount and frequency of seeing them before tsunami, that is kind of proof.
Right.
For example, on west coast, these buoys started arriving in November, and by January there were 100 such reports.
Oh, okay. Right.
So now we are collecting reports about oyster buoys, and on September 15th, during international coastal cleanup,
right.
we hope people will report more.
That's right. I should have come a few days later. I guess I could have helped. That's right.
There is always internet, so
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay. What about you were talking about high windage.
yes.
On that point, I want to talk about wood and trees, because nobody's talking about that. In Japan, when I read the Japanese reports, because the government has been forced by the government of states in Canada to act a little more forcefully and give a little more attention to this problem. And they come out. The first figures were way back were 20 million ton, probably from the 7th Fleet on the northern Mass. And then that was. I came out on my web. I came out with a figure. I think I put it in there about 3.5 million, and then these guys used a supercomputer in Japan and came up with something like 3 million or something ton, or 2.5.
Last figure that I heard was 1.5.
Well, 1.5. It geared down.
For floating.
Yeah, but none of those reports from the Japanese or anybody else includes trees or wood, and it's strange because. Maybe I don't know if you know or not, but do you know what Chiba is?
Yes.
Chiba, okay. On the
Yes.
Chiba coastline, all the way up to Aomori in the north,
Yes.
that was affected by the tsunami. They planted trees. Now I'm not too sure. I haven't got to count you how many.
As a protection from tsunami.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they say it worked. I think
Well,
they say it actually worked.
it did in the south because. Well, number one, the tsunami that came in on the south in Chiba was